Hey, what's up everyone, it's Jack Mini Trades back here again with another video, and today is going to be a pretty controversial one, so definitely feel free to discuss this further with me in the comments. And before we get started here, also be sure to, of course, smash that like button, subscribe, and with that being said, why do modern games suck so much? This is a question that's long been on my mind and something that I've really wanted to make a video about for quite a long time. For a bit of context, I've been playing video games for the better part of the last 18 years. Some of my favorite games when I was a little bit younger were COD, Modern Warfare 1 and 2, the classics. Black Ops, Assassin's Creed 1, Assassin's Creed 2 especially, that game was amazing. Assassin's Creed 3, pretty much all of the Forza Motorsport games after 3, all of the Batman Arkham games, those were absolutely incredible, some of the best games to ever come out. Batman Begins. If you guys remember, back in the day, there were a lot of video games that would come out in direct response to when movies would come out. So you'd have Batman Begins, you'd have like Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3, of course, classic amazing games like Minecraft. Simpsons Hit and Run was one of my all-time favorites. And of course, Sonic Adventure 2, who could forget that? Furthermore, I also grew up playing the classics, so, games like Galaxian, Missile Command, Pitfall, Pac-Man, Asteroids, and Super Mario Bros. With my dad on the old Atari 6400. All of that to say, I've got a pretty good appreciation for video games, and even the ones that didn't have hyper-realistic graphics like the ones that we enjoy today. And I think that in many ways, when I was growing up, whenever a video game would come out with better graphics than the year before, all of us would flock to it and point to it as the main selling point and the main draw, since it was the most obvious advancement and the most obvious improvement over previous generations. But now that I'm getting a little bit older, more than that, I think that the gameplay mechanics and story especially play an even larger role in what makes a game truly great. And so this, I feel, is what also makes modern video games, so many of them, so bad. Now, I've got to say that I don't think that all modern games suck. Of course, that would be kind of ridiculous to say. In fact, I have absolutely loved some of the remakes and even more recent additions to the Resident Evil franchise. Particularly, I'm talking about, of course, the remake to Resident Evil 2, 3, and now 4, as well as, of course, the newest additions, which are Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8 Village. Those games were absolutely fantastic. I love them so much. I've played through all of them except for Resident Evil 4, and that's just because I'm getting my PhD, and I unfortunately don't have as much time to play video games as I would like. But with that being said, you've seen a couple of episodes on this channel of me going through that game. It's absolutely fantastic. If you haven't played it yet, definitely go out and get it. It's so good. Also, of course, games like Cyberpunk 2077, GTA 5, Red Dead Redemption 2, Alien Isolation, Assassin's Creed Origins, Far Cry 5, Detroit Become Human, The Quarry, Dying Light, Have a Nice Death, and also, of course, all of the recent Spider-Man games like Spider-Man Miles Morales. There's now Spider-Man 2 out, but unfortunately it's not out for PC yet, so I'm still waiting. So what do all of these games have in common? Well, subjectively, they all have amazing graphics. Even the very indie game, which is Have a Nice Death from my list, has gorgeous graphics, even though it's just 2D. But so do all of the other games, and even many that people would consider to suck. So if good graphics alone aren't enough to make a game great, then what else do they have to have? Well, they all have pretty nice gameplay mechanics, and they offer a lot of small and unique things that really make you feel immersed when you play. So, for example, going back to Resident Evil. Resident Evil has always emphasized a feeling of scarcity with their games, so ammo is sparse, which really makes you think about whether it's actually worth it to shoot a zombie, or if it's better to just run and avoid it. In a similar vein, I think that video games like Dying Light really expand on this, and they make it even more so, where all of your melee weapons also take damage, and so this adds a little bit of an extra dimension where even beating a zombie up with a bat or something like that kind of makes you second guess whether it's worth it or not. And Dying Light takes it a step further, where it also adds in parkour, and not to mention, of course, Dying Light is a huge open world game, so there's that. but it really makes traversing the terrain enjoyable, and it really adds a great dimension to the gameplay. GTA 5 and Cyberpunk 2077 also take a really nice and interesting spin on the open world game, where they allow you to basically take cars off the street, drive them around in the massive open worlds, and, pretty much get into all kinds of trouble and do whatever it is that you want to do if you choose to do that. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that those games offer. They're sort of more in the line of realism and doing things, having consequences, all of that stuff. They're not quite as in the fantasy realm as Dying Light or Resident Evil would be. But, they have their appeal, and that's a really cool thing. If we move on to some of the indie games like Have a Nice Death, really, those are really nice because you get a ton of different weapons, you get a bunch of combat options, really fun comic book style graphics, which are really enjoyable, and they make the gameplay pretty fun. They also are pretty complex and difficult to play, so, there's a lot to actually keep you coming back to them because there's a lot of challenge. And then if we look to video games like Detroit Become Human and The Quarry, those are some really amazing games that offer truly immersive and cinematic experiences with the ability to shape and explore the story through decision-making and quick-time events, which really could alter the course of the video game as you go through it and mean the difference between your favorite character living or your favorite character dying. So that really offers a pretty great dimension in terms of gameplay. But even trash games oftentimes have good gameplay mechanics and ideas for how the user should interact with the world around them. And so some examples of games like this, I would say, are Gotham Knights and Jedi Survivor. Though to be clear, there are things that I like about each of these games, but what makes these games so bad compared to the games that I mentioned previously, well, in my mind, there's really one major thing, and that's going to be storytelling, right? So, bringing it back to Jedi Survivor, I've played the game a couple of times. I've played it a little bit over an hour, and I really enjoy the story. But it has a different problem, which we're going to get to in a little bit. I also like the story of Gotham Knights to an extent, but what really makes Gotham Knights in particular fail is the fact that the developers had very disparate stories that they were trying to weave together into a cohesive thing, but it kind of ended up being also woven into this boring and monotonous task-based progression where you basically go through the city and you beat up a whole bunch of thugs in environments that all end up looking the same after you've done it a couple of times, and you gain experience that way, which helps you to progress to the next part of the actual story. Rather than having things flow in a more linear and logical way, the way that they chose to go about telling the story is so disjointed, and it really leaves the player forgetting what actually happened the last time that they did a story mission because of how many unnecessary and unrelated tasks they had to complete in the interim between each of those story blocks. But bringing it back to great games that I had mentioned before, like Dying Light, GTA 5, Cyberpunk, and of course the Batman Arkham series, that was amazing. Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and some of those games that have massive open worlds like Gotham Knights, but where they excel is taking that immense possibility and distilling it down into a cohesive story with a clear track from the beginning to the end. There's a clear delineation between when side quests begin and when main story quests begin and end. The player doesn't have to participate in every single side quest to progress the story the way that they do in Gotham Knights. They can if they want to, of course, and they're rewarded for those experiences with fun and interesting story arcs, unique weapons or tools that help to make the gameplay a little bit easier, but it's not a requirement the way that it is in Gotham Knights. Also, the side quests in many of these games, though they do follow a similar formula within a game, they all feel fresh and they feel distinct in each one of these games. And it feels like the side quests have an introduction, they have a rising action, they have a climax, they have some falling action, and finally they end with some resolution. All of the elements that go into telling a good story are present. And even if the side quest only takes a few minutes to actually complete, they really make you feel like you accomplished something. Where in Gotham Knights, their side quests feel pretty meaningless and only really a means to an end, which is, again, to progress the main story. So with that being said, I think that the final thing that makes older games better than newer games is the fact that there's so much more optimization in the older games and there's more attention to detail. In the modern era of gaming, technology has advanced so far that we're now really able to do real-time ray tracing, get video games that play the way that cutscenes in older games used to, and in fact, modern video games play so well and look so good that you'd be hard-pressed in some cases to even realize that you're playing a video game, not just watching a movie. But with all of that, there's been a huge shift, I think, in the terms of quality control for these games. Take, for example, Star Wars Jedi Survivor and Gotham Knights. Both games have amazing graphics, and Jedi Survivor in particular has a really great story. But where both fail is in terms of performance. In the case of the great games that I had mentioned before, you can choose to play them on either PC or console or even something like the Steam Deck. But you'll have a great experience regardless of how you actually go about playing these games. They just work. And unfortunately, modern games seem to suffer in the first weeks or even first months of release for horrible stability on one or all of the platforms, which honestly is mind-blowing that these companies feel that it's okay to release such incomplete products to the public and still charge the full price. Which, by the way, these games these days are more and more often being released at the price point of $70, okay, which is more ridiculous than when I was growing up when video games would always cost $60. But nowadays, we're paying even more and we're getting even less in terms of quality. So overall, where do I see the video game market heading in the future? Well, I have to say that these companies, if they keep it up the way that they are right now, and if they keep acting as though they can just coast off of huge brand names or franchise names without delivering us consumers consistent quality, good stories, good gameplay mechanics, and performance that's satisfactory to adequately enjoy the products that they have been creating, I honestly think that the video game market is going to be crashing pretty soon, if it hasn't already. And so, as a fan of video games, I end with this. If you're a game developer, I want you to really take a step back from all of the things that you've been focused on for the past 5 or so years, like graphics and agendas, and just throw that away. Put all of your energy into creating compelling stories again that don't just release another game with great potential that misses the mark on performance. It's okay to push back the release of a video game if it means that when it comes out, it's actually going to be ready for the limelight. So, with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and agreed with me on at least some of my thoughts. If you have your own thoughts though, definitely feel free to drop those down in the comments below. And make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Later.